Culture.
Mind your culture.
in
My
your
culture.
mind.
Culture and
Culture
mind.
and mind.
This is the podcast for the culture.
Hi, and welcome to another Mind Culture podcast. Today I'm gonna talk with Jacqueline Fischer and Jörg from THEATER der Klänge in Dusseldorf. We are going to talk about tradition, about dance, about combining dance and composition, about Bauhaus, about new folk movement in Europe. This podcast is possible thanks to European Viral Visions Network, Erasmus Plus. Let's begin. Let me ask you first about THEATER der Klänge. I would love to know how you started and why the idea of THEATER der Klänge, because I know that it's an interesting idea of combining music and dance, and my question is why, how, and when?
When is easy. It was in 86, 87. We were still studying in the Folkwang-Hochschule here in Essen. And studying means I was studying composition, music, and Jacqueline dance. And we had also some actors, because in that time in the Folkwang-Hochschule we had theater, dance, and music. And despite the fact that this university had all these people, they were not collaborating, they were not working together. So the dancers were for themselves, the musicians were for themselves, and the actors. And the only place to meet was in the Mensa. So we were meeting every midday there, the actors, the dancers, and the musicians. And there was very quickly a certain group of 10 people. They said, why we are not working together? We are here and we could do it. And I made a plan that I said, yeah, we could realize a musical production involving dance and actors. And then from the dancers came the information that the dance teachers didn't want that. They said, no, don't do it. You can do that after your studies, but in your studies, please concentrate on your dance. So this collaboration was not happening. And that made me so angry that I said, no. Now really I'd start to get some money, and I was from Dusseldorf, and I asked here Dusseldorf, so if we do a certain project with Wolfgang students, music, dancers, and actors together, and we don't do something on Folkwang, we do something on another school, which is called Bauhaus. But this Bauhaus has a little bit this conception that artists are working together, despite the fact where they're coming from. And I found it very interesting, because I said, I don't only want to work as a musician in a theater, I also want to work with actors. Probably I act. I wanted to work with dancers, probably I dance. And also the other way around. The dancers have to make music, and the musicians, the actors have to make music, and the actors have to dance, and the dancers have to play. So that was a little bit this conception. And then we said, okay, who is interested in this Mensa group to found a theater group in Dusseldorf, because we have some money? And 10 people said, yes, we are interested in it. Let's try one project. And that was the beginning of the THEATER der Klänge. So it was interdisciplinary from the beginning on, because that was really the fact why we founded the group. And it was in Dusseldorf because it was not possible in the Folkwang in that time. And then we said we made one production, probably a second one when that works well, probably a third one. And we understand it for ourselves as an experimental tryout. And probably after we disappear and everybody is going where he wants. But these first 3 productions were so successful that we said, no, we continue, and we continued until today.
Just say, because you said we did it in Düsseldorf and not in the Folkwang. Just a precision, Folkwang is in Essen. Mm-hmm. It's not here, so it's another city, that's why.
How far have you gone since the beginning? Because it seems like now you're doing big European projects, so can you just tell me, like, how does it feel to go from the very beginning to where you are now?
In that time, in the 80s, there were choreographers working in the Folkwang Hochschule, for example, Reinhold Hoffmann, but there was also others like Mitsuru Sasaki and so on. So in that time, they were quite known. And I went to them and I asked them, so I'm a composer. I would like to work for you. And they said, no, I'm not interested. So and they said, why? So yeah, but it's too complicated. So we are working with CDs. So there we have a fixed music. We can work with this fixed music, and we make a collage. And it came from Pina Bausch, of course, because Pina Bausch was always working only with CD collage. And in that time, it was quite normal to work like this. There was no production here in North Rhine-Westphalia where a composer was working together with a choreographer. Also not in theater. In theater, it was very common that they worked sometimes with sound design, but not with musicians together. So it changed totally in the 35 years. Now there's a lot of choreographers working with composers, and even in theater, you have a mixture between sound design and music for even theater pieces. But in that time, it was not at all. And that was one of the reasons why we called it Theater der Klänge, because we made the focus on music, theater of sounds, because all the productions, we made 30 productions, were involving composers. So it doesn't mean that I was always a composer, because very often I was doing the directing, but we worked with different composers. So there were composers that were only working with electronic music or interactive electronic music. There were classic composers working for instruments. There were sometimes composers working with the language, rhythmizing the language or something like this. But for us, it was very important always to involve this musical process in the creating process, even in thinking. So Jacqueline can tell about a production we did, which was called Kunst der Tanzfuge, referring on Bach's Kunst der Fuge. And it was not that we only wanted to dance on the music on Johann Sebastian Bach. No, we wanted to take the structural system, how to compose a fugue in dance, so a visual fugue. And that we brought together, for example. So that's a little bit the sense of that what we did. And some of the pieces were very successful. We had a lot of international invitations. Some of the pieces were only for us important. So they had only here performances in Dusseldorf and a certain public. And since a few years, because you mentioned the European project, Jacqueline is now, because she's internationally very much interested, she really opened the way to make these connections to European projects.
Mm-hmm. Great. Would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, I because he said I could speak about the idea, the fact that Theater der Klänge, the specificity is that at the beginning, since Jörg is a composer, and then there was other composers also being a part of the founding members, always there was a reflection from a composer's perspective, even in the choreographic work. So even when we invited choreographers, because at the beginning I was only a dancer, no aspiration of doing more than being a part of the group. And the specificity was that the group had, and each member had an identity, but like he said, we were able to put our nose in the field of the others. So in fact, the interesting thing, it's that we always try to understand also somebody else's perspective. It was not, I do my job. I did a lot in state theater and I was only a dancer. So this I had done. And I thought, okay, I can dance for a choreographer or I could improvise. But the whole process is from the scratch, we throw everything in the space and we create everything from the scratch. So it took 6 months. So it was very idealistic, the whole thing. And working with the composers was, for example, for the dance part, even if we had choreographers at this time, it was a big challenge because they were not only happy to have some movement, it had to have a coherence, like a structure. So it took for me a long time to understand. And this was my almost learning years, how to understand what is the fact to go to the other side and choreograph. Like, what do you have to know more than only moving? And even it went one step further. It was clearer, and it came to this choreography with Bach thing, where, the fugue, it means that you have 16 notes, actually. You have, what is the name? Thema, and then you have the contra subject. It's called like this. And then it's a game of variations. This is, it's a little bit more complex than this, but in fact, you would have real-time 16 notes.
Or 12.
Or 12. And this is how many possible, mathematics is not the best thing I can do, but you can know how many possibilities of variating. And then it was the first time which we put a challenge and we said, in dance, I had a teacher who always said, my God, these choreographers, they put one movement after the other and it's like, what for? And I never understood what he was talking about because we have so happy to move, we dancers. So I could not get what he talks. And through this schooling, I understand that you can have a sustainability choreography also, how to do with less, more. So I understood after a lot of years what it means to choreograph, but not only to think from the perspective of a dancer, but to speak of a perspective of somebody who is also interested in structuring also the space more, or not only the space, but this we can do, but also the whole concept.
The time.
And the time, yeah. And then this was for me a aha, you say in German, aha experience, because I thought at the beginning, what a boring thing to have 16 movements and to choreograph 1 hour. I really believed. But we had so much fun with the dancers, and I always came to the rehearsal trying to see what are the scales we could still improvise and variate. So it was a really wow work for me and for the dancers. And then to combine. So I think the specificity for us, it's more than a name, Theater of Sounds. It's always you have to have a specificity in your work. So for me, this is the main specificity, to think it from this part, and also to work out of always the improvisation.
Yeah, but it's not only a problem of dance. If you go in a free jazz concert, you have the same problem. So there's probably 4 or 5 really good musicians on stage, and they show what they can. Yeah. And everybody is playing. So if you want to have this experience, probably it's a nice concert. If you say, yes, I enjoy how the saxophone and the violin and the clarinet are improvising. But in a certain moment, for me, always after 10 minutes, I say, okay, I see virtuosity and I hear it, but it's not music. So, and that's really the problem. And if you go back to Bach, for example, you have only this dan, 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 ba, 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 da. And it comes again, dan, 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 ba, ba, da, da. Then it comes in a variation, dan, 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 and so on. And then you say, I understood. That is something I have to understand. And he's now working with that, and he's changing it from time to time. I ask myself why he's changing it, where he's going to, and he comes back probably to the original, or the original transformed in a certain way. And that tells me something. And I can follow, because I understood already this little thing there, which is called a motive or thema, and this thema is developing. And then the question is only why it's developing and the way how it's developing. And that's exactly the same question we did on dance. You say, make a certain movement I can recognize because you make it again, and then start to variate it. And the question is, do some people come together and they start now to dance together, or do they stay separated? And if they stay separated, how far away, how near they come, and why don't they touch, or they touch? And if they touch, what is happening? That is very interesting. And that is similar to music in a certain way, because and that's why I said it's not only about space, it's about time, because you say, I invite people for sitting down there probably 1 hour, and they follow a certain process. And if they follow a certain process and they understand what is happening with something like a motive or a thema, if it's abstract, if it's not set, then they can say, yes, I followed the whole development, and it's very logic that in the end it came to this point. So I have also understood something. And for me personally, because composing is also, I think, a very intellectual process. It's not only about emotions. And it's very important that I go out from a piece and I say, yes, it was aesthetically, it was emotionally probably, but I understood something. And that for me personally is very important.
Yeah, so the understood is not understand the message, it's understand the composing.
The process.
The process of it.
But in a way it's also a message in the end.
I mean, for me, the great thing about it is because we are in a moment where we all ask to be sustainable. And I always said, what the hell it means in the art and especially in dance. So this would be for me one answer. The sustainability is how to do with less more and still to be essentials. This is a great thing. The other thing we had done is, what I like is that we were not afraid of using a lot of different, wie sagt man das? Not only dance, but also the dance to how reduced can be dance when it stopped being dance, it's only movement, and when it's dance. So this definition of what is dance, specifically because we were doing so much about Bauhaus, and this Oskar Schlemmer said once, if you move a little finger in the space, already is dance. So this is, for a dancer, like, okay, I agree, but
he says he said moving a little finger is already a big event. More on stage where you have a magic surrounding where that means something.
Yeah, so that means if you take it serious, then you start thinking, then I start linking all these comments of my teachers, which were not able to really transmit more than what do I mean when I say, wow. They even say they got a movement diarrhea. He came out of some performances and he told me, what is this? They got a movement diarrhea. And I thought, what is he talking about? Movement diarrhea. And now I got it, but so many years and through this trying out. So this, I think it's a mixing. Of course, I'm coming from this Volkswagen. It's a lot of Tanztheater, so it's the personality, the theatrical part of it, it's a lot with feeling and a lot of completely the other way of Bauhaus. So this mixing also together, I like because it's contrast all the time.
That is really interesting. Also, like the way you see the music. I think there is a big specificity the way you see the dance. Of course, like I can imagine that it's very individual, and for different people it can mean a different thing. But it almost seems like you approach it from this very intellectual way, very let's call it deconstructive or analytical way.
Yeah.
And I believe that there are some forces pulling in opposite directions as well. That is why it is interesting to combine different disciplines and see what other people think about it. Like I had the pleasure to work with some composers as well, and with a lot of contemporary musicians, and even in contemporary music operas, or they call it music theater. So I can kind of relate very much, and I think that to learn the strategies from music and apply it to choreography, I think it's always beneficial. Maybe it's not the only way, but for sure it is something good to have in the arsenal of choreography. I'm actually interested in because you seem to be very kind of I don't want to say obsessed, but very, very concentrate your work about this one specific art movement of Bauhaus. And my question, besides the geographical locality, because I'm sure geographical locality of this place is one thing, but there must be more if you keep on doing it. So tell me why Bauhaus and what is interesting for you in it and what is meaningful for you in it.
First, yes, it's true. It was again and again Bauhaus. And I tell you why after. But we mentioned Bach, and I also can mention Aristophanes. I also can mention the Baroque theater of masks. Gregorio Lambranzi, a dance master from the 18th century. I can mention monks of the monastery of Beauvais for the mystery play. So, in summary, and Piscator I mentioned yesterday, and so on. There is a strong interest in history, in theater history, in dance history, in music history, of course, but not focused on that what we call the classical canon. So we never did Goethe, we never made Wagner, we never made what else? Verdi. We never made all that. What the state theater is concentrating on high culture. So we have a lot of German operas which are well known, and even we could make something like a mise en scène of, let's say, a Wagner opera, no problem, or Mozart opera. We can make the Zauberflöte, no problem. But I think Germany is very much concentrating on that in the state theater, and it's diminishing a little bit the theater history. So you never see in the state theater, Baroque theater, in a way how Baroque theater was, except it is Handel. So you have a Handel opera, but you don't have this Baroque theater which was existing on the marketplaces. And it existed. For example, that what Gregorio Lambanzi made was a mixture between dance and music and acting and conferencing and all this. So it was a totally hybrid form which disappeared in a certain way when we got the state theaters. And it's the same about the mystery play. It's very interesting to say, what was a mystery play? It came out from the churches and it was played on big places before the churches by monks. So what was that? How the Greek theater was working. So we know a little bit about the Greek theater. But if you see, for example, today an Orest in the state theater, they never made it in the form like the Greek theater was made, in an open place, and you have the setting of the nature, and there is a dance chorus and things like this. So if you really go back to that, how was the practice of doing it, what they did, it's totally another thing than what they interpret today. So in general, I was very much interested in theater forms which are not established in state theater. So that's a little bit that. And one of the things which is very important for me, also as an aesthetic movement, also as a thinking process in the Weimar Republic, was that these ancient soldiers of the First World War, so they were not old, but they made the war. They were four years in the war. Gropius was an officer, Schlemmer was a soldier, Johannes Itten was a soldier, and so on. So they came back and they said, never again war, because we know what it is. We were going there, hurrah, and we fight against the French. And they came back and said, never again, it's really shit, and we are only something, not more than a munition. So, and we survived. And that means we have now the chance, because the emperor is gone, we have now the chance to build a new society, to build a new man, a new human being, to think about from zero about everything, because everything that was established before is no worse anymore, because that lead us to this First World War. And I like very much this idea that you can start from zero, that you have a blank paper, there's nothing written on it, you made only one point, and you say, let's start from this point. And they were a little bit thinking like this. And if you read the diaries from these people, they said, yes, forget about everything we have learned, forget about everything what was before, forget about everything what was judged before as beautiful. So let's start again on zero. And this starting again on zero opened all the possibilities. That meant also that they said, yes, I'm a painter, or I'm a sculptor, or I'm a photographer, but I do theater now. And everybody who is interested in enjoying me, in my group, and he brings an instrument, or he brings the possibility to move his body, or he brings the possibility to speak, he has a good voice, bring it, and we start only on saying, make beep on stage. And let's think about what we can make with this one beep. And then they go on. And is that the text or not? And then the Dada movement came and they said, no, we don't have to have text. We are only working with onomatopoeic sounds and so on. And this freedom of saying, let's try it from zero on, it's not only in Germany. It happened also in Russia after the Russian Revolution. It happened in Hungary. It happened in a lot of places. The surrealism in France took it in another way. But of course, and there's this regional connection that I say, yeah, this certain way of thinking, what I read in the text from Gropius or from Oskar Schlemmer, it's very similar to how I think. So it has something to do with my culture. Probably it's in a way typical German, I don't know. But I understand very much this thinking. And it tells me much more when I read these texts than, for example, Pina Bausch, who is saying, I cannot speak about my art, it has to be seen on stage. Okay, but I want to understand something. Why don't you tell me something about that, what you do? What is the thinking in your process? She never spoke about that. So for me, it was a no-go to go in this direction. I wanted to have people who told me, yes, I don't know anything, but we tried out that and we tried out that and we made a conclusion. And the conclusion was, for example, I invented the Stäbetanz, for example, with Oskar Schlemmer. And this simple way of, I do something, A and B, I combine A and B, and my conclusion is that and that. It's like a mathematic formula, and you say, yes, but it's the same words today. But now we are totally in another situation. We don't come out from a war. This history was forgotten a certain time, then it came back, and then, that's what I find very interesting, the state occupied it. So if you see today a Bauhaus exposition somewhere, they always say, it was a great academic institution, and there were these really high intellectual people, and they only were I don't know, in a way like monks and so on and so on and so on. I said, no, it's not true. What I read in the text is totally something else. It was open people. They even were so naive in a certain moment that they played like children. But they were thinking about it, what they were doing, and then they were making this conclusion. And I want to give also these other images. And Jacqueline always said, yeah, if you ask an architect what is the Bauhaus, he said it was a school about architecture. He don't know that there was a stage class. If you go to designers and you ask, what is the Bauhaus? And say, yeah, it was a design school. And you say, yeah, you know that there was also a stage in the Bauhaus? No, I don't know. And then we say, yeah, but especially the stage was the playing place. So they played like children. That's a little bit sad. And that gives another image on the Bauhaus. And for me, these both things are very important. This German thinking of very intellectual, making conclusions, starting it from a 0 point. But the other way, we are together, we are working together, we have fun to work together, and we play like children, and let's try out what we can do. And from that on, we start to make aesthetics results.
I think it's because I'm not German, so I can say also that what do we know about Germany? Coming from Greece, we know only the bad things about Germany. Yeah. And then it's because it's also maybe the only thing after the Second World War which was promoted from the press. And going a little bit to show it is more than this official, like Wagner, what is after? It's not only a bad man with a mustache who destroyed. It was more than this. So to reduce Germany to only one bad part of it, it's also unfair because it's, I don't know, this time 60 million of people. What is about the rest? And what is about the arts? And what has happened there? So we don't know a lot of things. I was doing intervention in a film school, and they asked me to show what was in the 20s in Germany in the arts. So I make a PowerPoint and I was researching, and it's so much happening in the arts, in the dance field, in the music, in this connection with a lot of coming people from America, from France, from Russia. It was really a Kessel. So people don't know. And even Jörg said, not even their own students of this know. So actually, I think it's also a nice thing to want as a German citizen. And then I see there is an interest also to try to put in the front, to talk about also the nice things about a society, which we don't need to speak hundreds of years of always this one thing, but to show also the other part of it, which is also something. It is, it's good to know, and it's like you said, it's a tool. It's a kind of thinking, this Bauhaus thing, which is not related to a form, but it's a way, a methodic, and toolbox. And if you just use it, you can use it to do anything. It's the way of thinking and how to start something. It's not giving you a way to do things, but it gives you a philosophy to understand how you put the human being in the middle of what you want to do. So this, I think, especially in dance, now it's new that you have choreographic masters and people start thinking what is about choreography. Till now, it was a job you could do without any. So I think it's also a nice way to see this way. Of course, the dance word, this appearance of the dance like it was in Bauhaus with Oskar Schlemmer didn't succeed because it clashed with the history of the dance at this moment, want to free itself. No tutu, no ballet, no point shoes, no nothing, naked. The best is naked. Isadora Duncan, what is her name? Kreuzberg, Paluca, all these people, they only wear a night dress or almost naked. And then come this bunch of people in Weimar and then in Dessau who, because Jörg said it on the performance, imagine the new human being coming from the war, so not having half of his face, not having an arm, not having a leg, people who were destroyed. So they thought of the civil population and they tried to put it in an artistic way. But the dance was somewhere else. And so they didn't understand. There was no communication between these both words. And it didn't happen. So the world of the dance is not recognizing all this part of history, which has been done on stage for this reason, because they were completely going like this. So they didn't meet. And it's a pity. Until today, when you talk about Bauhaus, people know tragic ballet and they don't even know anything about. And they're not even interested in, even if you talk to official places, they tell you, yeah, we have given money for the 100 years, it's enough. We don't have money for this anymore. It's like, it's not even recognized as an art thinking. So this is kind of weird, I think.
Okay. You say there's this one thing, like you say, starting from zero is the way of Bauhaus, right? And yet you're very interested in tradition. So there are two kind of, I mean, I understand, but also I want to understand a little bit more. Why is working with tradition important for you?
There is a good citation from the Lorca, which we mentioned one time for one piece. It says, if you lose your culture, you lose yourself. And for me as a German, it's very important to define myself as a German by tradition. And the question is, which tradition? So, and there is an offer, like I said before, that they say, if you're on the way on Goethe and Thomas Mann and Gerhard Hauptmann and in the music Richard Wagner, Johannes Brahms, Mozart, Beethoven, then you're on the right way. Okay, I could accept it. I could say, yes, okay, that's my tradition. But in a way, that is a tradition which is coming from the emperors, from the houses which had money, from the churches. So, in fact, Mozart was very much depending on money from the Esterházys and so on. And it continued. Wagner would not be possible without Ludwig in Bayern. So he was a king. So it in a way, it was always something like a representative culture of the power people. I don't judge this. Of course, it's great music, it's great theater, it's great literature. But there was always something apart, which I call the popular culture. And the popular culture was not financed by the emperors and the kings. So it was happening on the streets, on the marketplaces, or in little theaters. We made once a piece about a German theater woman called Friederike Caroline Neuber. We made a whole piece about her. We said, the passion of a principal, because she, as a woman in the 18th century, tried to build a formal theater in Leipzig and later in Dresden. She didn't succeed because they didn't give her the money for building a theater. So she was always on marketplaces or rented places, something like that. And in a way, as 60 years old woman, she disappeared in a certain way. She mentioned in the history because she was banning the Harlequin from stage, the Hans Wurst in that time. And she said, no, the Hans Wurst has not a place anymore on stage because we want a serious theater like Molière established in France. We don't have that in Germany in the time. And I find it very interesting because no one knows about her, only the name, and because only of this fact that she said we banned the Harlequin from stage, but not what did she do, what was the pieces, what was her agenda, why she didn't succeed to build a stable theater, and so on and so on. It's very interesting. And this kind of history is always very interesting for me because I say, yeah, there is something apart which is not stately confirmed, but which has nothing to do with the normal image, like she said, that we say, yeah, we are the warriors and we are the man killers and we are the Heil Hitler people and so on. That we are not. So there was a certain way in the Weimar Republic, and we can talk about it 1 hour, what was a way to the Nationalsozialismus. No. But if it's interesting, no, but it's very interesting in the Weimar Republic, you had really several directions which were all talking about the new human being. Yeah. And then the Hitler did it, but the communists did it also, and the Bauhaus did it, and a lot of other people talked about what will be the new human being. The question is who succeeded politically, and that was in fact for 12 years the Nationalsozialist. And the question more is, there was an open time, and for that I find especially the Weimar Republic so interesting, that they said, yes, so take everything on the table, like it could be a blanket paper like in the Bauhaus, and we start really with nothing. or we take the whole history which is now available and we form something about it. And they did it. So everybody did it in a certain way. And we now, because I said we are in another situation, we have 70 years or more, even 80 years of freedom, of peace. We don't have a war. We are connected in Europe as one of the states of 28 states and so on. So we have totally another history. And at the same time, I say our period now today is very much like the Biedermeier. So we are very established. It's very clear what is allowed and what not and so on, which artists are supported and why. And the state theater is getting the millions and the free theater is only getting the little thousands and so on and so on. It's very clear. So there's no situation at all that we can say, let's think everything from zero. Let's start at a 0 point, and we have all the open possibilities. And even I can say, with the 35 years we experienced that in the 1980s the society was much more open than it is today. So that for me now today, both things are very important. So if we start to refer on a certain history, which I find in a certain moment important for us to take time, like a research time for it. Then the second question is always, so if we understood that, what it was about, then we take all the material on the table. We start on the 0 point, but it's not the blanket paper. There is material on the table. And we start now to reorganize this material we have to a new structure, which is telling something for today. So let's come back, for example, to the mystery play. Of course, we didn't reconstruct a mystery play like the monks have done it in 1230. No, it was about understanding the idea of a mystery play and then inventing new, and invented, of course, in a way that we say it could be interesting for public today to see it in that way.
And anyhow, the traditional dance we now use, we want to go the direction, is also about always this identity. Actually, we are quite often coming back to what is identity for me, because I'm always the foreigner everywhere where I go. And it's even foreigner being among composers, being again and the foreigner. So the identity question is for me really important. But this time is also an identity question of what are we more than the official storytelling. And we realized, because in the other EU project, we had also a nice experience. We were 5 countries, and we invited each one to bring his own tradition in order to say, who are we for closing this project? And each one had to teach us his one little song and his one little dance. And it was really big fun, really big fun, because we had a lot of chance to learn the language, and we didn't understand a thing. We were singing in Polish or in Basque, like, oh, and then, but it's fun because these dances we learned, it was about dancing with each other, changing a lot of times and having fun, because you lose it, you forget it. So it's not this contemporary approach, like everybody is very serious. It's like, okay, we don't even look the public. We are completely,
Or
now it was like
angry to the public.
Now we were like, wow, having fun. And everybody went out of it and said, even the youngest, Karina, she said, I must say one thing. I forgot what it means to dance and to have fun, to enjoy it. So we kept this as a moment of looking a little bit, what happens with the dance today? Why we lost it? And it's not that we are interested in folklore. I did a lot of folklore in my student times because it's a part of the curriculum, and I know what it is. And in Greece, we have it very alive. But Jörg realized, he asked me, do you know what you will teach? We represent Germany. And then we had to look in the internet because he didn't know anything, neither the music nor the dance. So we realized it's quite difficult, this area, why there is not easy, accessible material. Even if he didn't get it, maybe, and I don't know it, maybe I can get it. So it was a questioning why some part of the world, like let's say this one, or we saw with Norwegian one, the Norwegian guy also said, look, I think that we have no folklore, but we learned now, we had a research time with another Norwegian dancer, and she said, it's not true, we have a tradition, but a lot of people don't know about it. So it's interesting what official history makes about all things which happens in one country. So it was the curiosity to say how we connect with the fun part, how they connect with the social event. It's not only going on stage, but it's maybe, through these European projects, we learn also how to get new audiences. So it means now, what is with the civil society? How do we only invite them in the theater, or do we maybe organize something which is not a folklore or a tradition, what it could be? So we start now a research about connecting this world of what is happening with this part of the dance, which is an oral tradition. You transmit from one family to the other. And is it only a closed form, like a ballet, you have rules, or it's something you can play with it? And through researching, we realized there are now completely contemporary form of using all this language and dance and music to improvise, and we did not know. So it happens in Belgium, Ghent, or Cologne, or Bonn, or where we were now, Neukirchen-Flühen, what do I know? And but even in Switzerland, I saw in Poland. I mean, anyhow, in Europe, in Italy, there is a really very alive scene. France. It started there because France use in all events. They have this doing in the open space. There comes some musician and everybody comes and dance. And it's not about putting any real traditional costume. And, it's not the Bergmann Heilig. It's not, holy thing. It's fun. People come and by music, they want to dance. So a few steps, the music, and this is like it was in the Middle Age. And then people have fun. So this is what we try now to look, is how to combine our stage work, which is elite work, with the contemporary understanding of what is movement, what is gravity, what is, and then this part of fun, can it combine? And what we do about this. So this is why we always, in this thing, it's a lot of layers, the identity and then the interest. And this is always what we do to connect, just Jörg said, we are taking always something from the history, but to know, so to have this connection to the society also, and why this thing happened, but never to put it as a museum form on stage. We're not interested in this.
There's 2 points I want to adjust. The one thing is this identity thing again. We had once a musician here, a cello player, a woman, and she said she's very often doing world music projects. So she's making improvisations together with Arabian musicians, with Turkish musicians, with Balkan musicians from ex-Yugoslavia and so on. And of course, it comes always a moment that they say, Beate, please, now a German tune. And she was always like, I don't have. I can offer you Mozart. I can offer you Bach. I can offer you Beethoven. And then, no, a popular tune. Say, I don't know. So, and she was always empty. She had nothing in her hand. And she said, I asked myself why I don't have. They have so much. They can immediately start singing a popular tune from, from Ankara or from, Cairo or wherever they come from. And I don't have that. And I said, yeah, it's true. I don't also have that. I have some children's songs we have sang in school. But even these children's songs, they are not really the real popular songs which were sung in the little villages. It was more that there was a collection of songs which they had in school. It's called Die Mundorgel in German. And then I realized there is a lack also on this form of popular culture. And the question is why? Why did we forget that when it starts? And exactly now with the research, I know it started after the First World War. And it was even nearly on zero after the Second World War. So it had also very much to do with negotiating everything which could be in a way traditionally Germany. So What did they take instead? They took Anglo-American music, they took beat and rock and roll and rock music and all this, and today they're on the rap and so on and so on and so on. So in a way, it's something like we don't understand ourselves anymore on any tradition we had, probably. So we understand us here as an international people which are influenced by mostly England and America. And I said, yes, but we come back to the sentence. If you lose your culture, you lose yourself. So what are we? Are we something like the, 49th state of the United States of America, situated here in Europe? Or do we have something like a certain identity, which is also cultural identity, which I find very important? And then the other thing is, it's not about really that you say, yes, I know a certain old song and I can really play it or can sing it. We were now in a workshop last weekend and there was a musician and she said, we make something like a melody Lego. That means you have something like stones with certain little motifs and you can combine it together and you're constructing like these melodies you can play or you can sing. And I found that very interesting because it was then not the question, what is a certain traditional song? It was more about what is a tune which could be traditionally in all these songs which were sung in the old times here. And it's very simple in a certain way. And of course, this tune is sounding otherwise than, for example, a Slavic tune or a Baltic tune, or a Turkish tune, or an Arabian tune, because we have a certain amount of melodies, we have a certain modal system, which was very much established here. And this, what you take here, is something like you say, yeah, it could be regional, but in the form it's invented. And they say, it's what I take from them, in dance and in music, they say, no, in that old times, 100, 200 years before, when there was in a village a dance festival or something like this, the people came together. It was not that they made traditional dances in a certain form, which was clearly choreographed, what the traditional groups are doing today. They say, no, they all were able to learn by looking some steps forward, some steps back, taking, touch, changing, things like that. And it immediately they knew, okay, it's working like that. And the musicians the same. They were making something like a certain melody, and they started to make the bricks to improvise 4 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever the dance was needing, for making in a certain tune a certain dance music. And that's a little bit again, the material which is on the table, where we will start now in June for 3 weeks, and then in autumn again for a few months, to work with contemporary dancers and musicians, of course, to say, that's a material, and now we try to play with this material and to form new, but of course, and that is a little bit what we have to have on stage, we have to involve this reflection on a lost culture.
I want just to add, and we finish, the interesting thing about this area we discover now, it's not one identity. It's very interesting. It's an area where a lot of passages of different conquerors and people who were like French or Russians or English. So even now we get to discover all this local of North Rhine-Westphalia. It's not only German. So they tell you, we have polka because we have mazurka because we have bourrée. So you see also how many, it's a passage area. So this identity is built out of a lot of crossings of a lot of people who were here and left. So it's also now interesting is how we connect to all our dancers. They are not Germans. They are coming from all over the world. We come from Israel till Armenia, and then coming from, what do I know, Spain. So we want to a little bit see also what does that mean for them meeting this and how their own thing is coming out. So it's really interesting to see this idea of identity in the bad sense, like we close ourselves. No, this is not our intention. Is also to understand that culture can be something very specific, but also very open, not closed.
That, because you mentioned before the European projects, that was a very astonishing thing for me to see that all the other groups were in a way very homogeneous. Yeah. The Polish group is only Polish people.
Only Polish people.
The French group is only French people. Right. The Italian group is only Italian people. And we, Theater der Klänge, we are the only international group.
Well, I could maybe say the Austrian group is also quite international.
No, but in these circumstances, it's an exception.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's funny.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for this conversation. I think we have to go back to the meetings because they will be very angry at us if we don't get there on time, which is we're 10 minutes, 13 minutes over time.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay. Thank you so much for this conversation. And,
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was nice to talk.
Yes, yes.
And now you know a little bit more about us.
Yeah, it's very interesting.